Hi guys, and welcome to my first What's for Dinner video. I'm hoping this series will give you ideas on new, easy, and affordable dinners. Let's get started with chicken and dumplings. I'm starting out with my crock pot to cook my chicken. If you have a rotisserie chicken, that's great. I'm putting my crock pot on high for 4 hours. My chicken is still partially frozen because I didn't take it out in time. And I'm just gonna go ahead and season it with some salt and pepper, Italian seasoning, onion powder, and garlic powder. Then I'm gonna add in about a half a cup of chicken stock. At about the 3.5 hour mark, I'm gonna go ahead and get my vegetables ready. So I'm just giving them a really good wash. This recipe did call for 4 celery stalks and 4 carrots. I modified it to what our family prefers. We're not huge on cooked celery, so I only did 2 and it still turned out really nice. Same with the carrot. I took one out just because I think one of the carrots I used were relatively large, so I went ahead and just cut that down to 3. Same with the onion. It called for 2 small onions and we're just not big onion eaters, so I do like the flavor. It is nice and it definitely makes this dish, so I added about a 1/3 cup. On about medium-low heat, I'm gonna melt a little bit of butter and saute my vegetables for about 10 minutes until they're soft. From there, I'm just adding in a half a cup of flour and I'm stirring just enough to soak up that butter and coat my vegetables. And then I'm gonna go ahead and add in about 6 cups of chicken stock. This recipe called for chicken bouillon. I didn't have any, so I just improvised. So instead of the 8 cups of water and the 4 tablespoons of better than bouillon, I just did 6 cups of chicken stock. While I wait for that to come to a boil, I'm gonna go ahead and shred my chicken. That way I can add it into my pot. I'm adding in Italian seasoning, some salt and pepper, garlic powder, and onion powder, along with 1 cup of milk. I'm gonna go ahead and let that simmer and work on our dumplings. This part was always really intimidating to me and I'm still learning, especially because I've never used Bisquick before. And it definitely has a different texture. I didn't have a sifter, so I'm just taking a fork and trying to get out as many of the lumps that I can, add a little bit of air into it. Again, with the seasonings, I'm just putting in a little bit of salt, a little bit of Italian seasoning, and garlic powder. I melted about 4 tablespoons of butter and added in 1 cup of milk, and you're just going to want to stir this until it's combined. Do not overmix this. I do feel like it was a little more runny than it should have been. I don't know if I maybe should have cut down on the milk a little bit. So I'm just taking a 1/4 cup and placing the dumpling mixture into the soup. I'm gonna let that simmer for about 10 or 15 minutes with the lid on, and then you should be ready to serve. On to my next recipe. This is one that we make probably weekly. It is like a baked spaghetti. So I'm just starting out with a large pot of water so I can boil some noodles. I like to break my noodles in half. I feel like they're just easier to work with. And I'm using probably about half of like your standard package. While our noodles are cooking away, I'm taking about 8 ounces of cottage cheese, 1 block of cream cheese, a handful of mozzarella, probably like, I don't know, a 1/3 cup, a good spoonful of garlic, and salt, pepper. I did not have pesto, and I promise you guys, if you add, I'd say like 2 or 3 tablespoons of pesto to this mixture, it changes the entire thing. I was out of it. I tried it with Italian seasoning and it just did not come out nearly as good. So if you can get your hands on it, I highly, highly, highly suggest adding a few tablespoons of pesto into this mixture. It is so good. I'm draining my noodles, and a little tip is to run your noodles under cold water. That way they don't continue to cook. I'm using that same pan that I used to cook my noodles in. Kenny thinks it's weird, but it's one less dish that I have to wash. So I'm just gonna brown up about a pound of meat, maybe a little bit under a pound, and add in my favorite red sauce. I love this one by Prego. It's the farmer's market version. I think I do like the tomato basil. In a baking dish, I'm going to take about half of my cooked noodles and place those on the bottom, layer my cheese mixture as evenly as possible, add the rest of my noodles, and then top it off with our meat mixture. Place that in the oven at 350 degrees for probably about, I don't know, 30 minutes, or just until it's bubbly. You're welcome to add mozzarella on top. I feel like it's fine without it. I believe that is what the recipe calls for though. On to one of my favorite soups. It is a loaded potato soup. I have my crock pot on high for 4 hours, and I'll be adding in 3 cups of chicken stock. I have some petite gold potatoes that I'm gonna wash and start to cut up just into like bite-sized pieces. Some of them were starting to sprout, so I did just kind of cut those off. You're welcome to take the skin off. For me, you really can't taste it that much. I feel like the skin is a lot thinner on a gold potato versus like a russet potato. This recipe called for a whole onion. I did maybe about a 1/3 cup. I think that's like the most I ever do in any recipe that calls for onion. I'm gonna place that into a crock pot. I did cook up some bacon from breakfast, so I'm just starting to crumble that up, maybe like 5 or 6 pieces, and giving it a good stir, popping the lid on and letting it just cook away. At about the 3.5 hour mark, I'm going to take a pot and add in 4 tablespoons of butter, letting that melt, and whisking in a 1/3 cup of flour. You're gonna wanna whisk that just until all the lumps are out and it's nice and smooth. I'm gonna gradually add in 1 can of 2% evaporated milk. I feel like the slower you add this and mix it, the better it comes out. It's just nice and smooth. While I'm waiting for that to finish thickening up, I'm going to take the back of my fork and kind of mash up my potatoes. I don't have a potato masher. That's the thing with cooking, you kind of just gotta improvise or use what you have. You're gonna see that a lot throughout my video. I don't have a lot of like the proper tools. Once that's done thickening up, I'm gonna go ahead and combine that into my broth mixture. Give that a good mix. Add in about 1 cup of sharp cheddar cheese. I did freshly grate mine. It makes such a difference. It melts a lot better. It doesn't give off like a grainy texture or anything. The last thing is 1/2 cup of sour cream and salt and pepper to taste. Creamy beef stroganoff is one of Kenny's absolute favorites. We haven't had it in a really long time, so he was really happy to see that I made it this week. In a pan, I'm taking about 2 or 3 tablespoons of butter so that I can brown my meat. I'm just using beef chunks that are made for beef stew. While I'm waiting for that to cook up, I'm going to again put my slow cooker on high for 4 hours. I did double this recipe, so I'm taking a family-sized can of cream of mushroom soup, 1 carton of mushrooms, adding in my beef, topping it off with a nice spoonful of garlic, giving that a good mix. I noticed that it was a little thick, so I did go ahead and add in probably like half a cup of beef stock. That's totally optional. I've done it without the beef stock. This is actually the first time I've done that, and it turned out pretty much about the same. It's just about done, so I'm gonna go ahead and add in my block of cream cheese and start to cook my noodles. You can use any noodle that you prefer. I just use bow tie. Once your cream cheese is all incorporated, I'm going to add in 8 ounces of sour cream, salt and pepper to taste, and give that a good stir. I did this as like a self-serve kind of thing, so I just let you grab your noodles and then however much sauce you would like. This next recipe is one that I really like to make when I need something quick, but it's still substantial enough that I can send leftovers with Kenny for work the next day. So it's chicken parmesan. I'm preheating my oven to 350 degrees. Taking a bowl, I'm gonna crack 1 egg, give that a good whisk. I always start with 1 egg. If I need more, then I'll crack another one, but I just don't wanna waste it if I don't have to. In a separate bowl, I'm gonna combine about, I think I did about a cup of Italian breadcrumbs and then maybe half a cup or a third cup of Parmesan cheese. I'm cutting off the extra fat on my chicken, and then I'm going to slice it in half. So instead of having 2 chicken breasts, I made it into 4. I'll start by dipping a piece of chicken in my egg, coating that really well, and then coating it in the breadcrumb mixture as well as possible. I'll let that bake for about 15 or 20 minutes. I do cut it in the middle when it's about done just to make sure that we're good. So cooking times definitely may vary. While my chicken is cooking, I'm going to take a pot of boiling water and again, crack my spaghetti noodles in half. You can tell I had to rush this recipe because the kids were going a little crazy, but my chicken's done, so I'm pouring my marinara sauce over the top and placing a slice of mozzarella cheese on top, putting that back in the oven so the cheese can melt and that sauce can get nice and warm. I'm gonna drain my noodles again, give them a good rinse with cold water so they don't keep cooking while I make this little garlic sauce. I'm taking about 4 tablespoons of butter, letting that melt, a good spoonful of garlic. I'll toss my noodles in that, and then I will add in probably about a half a cup of Parmesan cheese. Normally I would do parsley flakes in this, but I was out, so I just improvised with Italian seasoning and it still turned out great. Of course, salt and pepper to taste. Give that a good mix and you are ready to serve. Thank you guys for watching. I hope this gave you some ideas, and I will see you in our next video.